Hello everyone. These are just a few thoughts I wanted to share on words and language, sparked by something I heard on a live broadcast last night on YouTube with a channel I follow on current news affairs. It just got me thinking about something, and I put two and two together and made five, and I just thought I'd ramble for a little bit and tell you, what my thought processes were. As someone who writes, I'm fully aware of the power of words, the emotions and sentiments they can evoke and how they can encourage or even beguile us. Right from when I first started to put words together and read, long before I started school, I've had this fascination with words, their derivations and spellings, their sounds, their meanings and their ambiguities, particularly. How a certain word can convey all sorts of meanings, perhaps not even those intended by the writer or speaker. A particular example is sophisticated. We can speak of someone being sophisticated and mean it in a positive way. We think it means the opposite of simple or ordinary, that it means worldly wise, discriminating, cultured. Well, it can do. But those positive connotations only came to the word in the early 19th century. If we delve deeper into the origins of the word, we find something different. When it first was used in the English language from the early 17th century, it meant mixed with a foreign substance, impure, no longer simple or natural, and it carried connotations of cheating, corruption and dishonesty. So, trace it back further to its Latin root, sophista, from which, through French, we also get sophistry, meaning subtle but fallacious reasoning. And you may have come across the word sophism, meaning an argument devised for purposes of deceit or to exercise one's ingenuity. Now, even if we don't know the word sophism, we will always remember times when we've been conned by someone else. So, sophisticated, that's what I mean by ambiguity. We witness the power of words in literature, poetry and songs, how they can affect our emotions, reducing us to tears, encouraging our national pride, changing the way we think, moving us to action. The 16th century Spanish nun Saint Teresa of Avila said, "Words lead to deeds. They prepare the soul, make it ready, and move it to tenderness." Well, we'd like to think so. Sadly, too often words can lead the other way. Fighting talk, propaganda, manipulation, misinformation. We see it all the time now on social media. In other ways too, we're very acutely aware of words that we can and cannot use, depending on context maybe. This is where we head into the territory of talking about things like freedom of speech and issues of censorship, book burning. It's a tricky area. For my own part, I'm a libertarian. As the French writer Voltaire said, "I may disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it." Where I would draw my own personal line, though, is where the words or language are used to deliberately invoke hostility or hatred towards others. I'm talking about overtly racist or sexist language, for instance. That's not to say those words cannot ever be used, but it's in the context with which they're used and the tone. Tone makes such a difference. If we say to someone, "You old fucker," it can be a term of endearment between friends. But if it's "you old fucker," it's something else entirely. Anyway, that's by way of introduction to what I wanted to say. On this programme last night, they were discussing, among other things, what's more and more being seen to be the cognitive decline of President Joe Biden, and they used examples from recent speeches of him where he showed obvious lapses of memory, forgot words, forgot names, got facts wrong about people, etc. Now, whatever is going on, questions are understandably being asked about whether his mental faculties are deteriorating and what might be the underlying cause. It could, of course, simply be pressure and stress. I mean, who would want a job like he's got at that age? Whatever you might think of him as a politician or a person, you'd be cold indeed if there wasn't a part of you that finds this all disturbing, even maybe upsetting in some way, especially if, like I have, you've known people with dementia and other cognitive dysfunctions. Now, after these speech clips, one of the presenters of the programme said, "He looks like his Duracell batteries are running down." And then very quickly added, "This is not meant to be disrespectful to people with dementia." As it was a live feed with live chat, I immediately commented, "Actually, it is disrespectful to people with dementia," to which I then got a comment back from another viewer saying, "It isn't disrespectful, it was a joke. And if you're saying it isn't allowed, then you're attacking freedom of speech." To which I then commented back, "I didn't say it wasn't allowed, I simply corrected him when he said it wasn't disrespectful to people with dementia." Oh dear, that I'm afraid is social media. Knee-jerk reactions, taken out of context, personal attacks, etc. I left it there. As for whether or not I was right with my reaction, well, you can decide that. I'm not saying, of course, that there isn't a place for satire. Satire is vital. From Juvenal through to Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels, through to Spitting Image, The Simpsons and South Park, satire must always have its place in our culture. To show up the lofty and self-important politicians, etc., and bring them down to size. It's one thing, though, to satirise politicians on their political failings and conceits, quite another to joke about their perceived mental or physical conditions, even though it was quite mild, really. To me, it's still in the same territory as criticising body shape or intellectual capacity. It's ad hominem. Again, though, everyone will have their own view on this. Here we wander into the realm of what we would commonly term political correctness. That term's been hijacked by the right and is generally used now in a derogatory way. Oh, people telling us what we can and cannot say, people telling us how to think. The whole thing has been complicated further in the culture wars debate. But let's look at the term political correctness. What does it mean? First thing that always strikes me about the use of such terms by the right, political correctness, do-gooder, social justice warrior, is that they're all fundamentally positive. They use them ironically, of course, but when we're brought up, aren't we encouraged to do the correct thing, to do good, to uphold values like social justice? Aren't these the kind of things we really want? So the irony rebounds on the critics, I think. And what is political correctness? Well, let's think about it this way. As an awkward and problematic, but ultimately positive and well-intentioned way of coming to a more inclusive use of language, and thereby hopefully a more inclusive and understanding approach to our fellow humans. I can remember back in the 60s and 70s we had prime-time viewing comedy programmes like Till Death Us Do Part and Love Thy Neighbour, and although they were developed deliberately to draw attention to the bigotry and stupidity in the main characters, which they succeeded in doing, they still routinely contained words like packy, nignog, puff, coon and so on. Things that thankfully you don't hear very much now, and certainly not on primetime television or very much, even if people still like to think about those words. Now that's progressive in my view. It detaches the stereotype embodied in the epithet and hopefully leads us more towards thinking in broader terms about people. Interestingly, Warren Mitchell, who played Alf Garnett in Till Death, said he was sometimes approached in the street by fans who'd say to him, "I love Alf, I agree with every word he says," only to be shot when he told them to fuck off. Mitchell's family were Russian Jews, so speaking just 20 or so years after the liberation of the concentration camps, he knew too well the bigotry and hatred he was sending up in his character. and how it often lurks not too deeply beneath the surface in many people. Sadly though, people will always find ways of lumping others together and giving it a negative connotation and generating new stereotypes. We humans, we do so love to categorise and lump together. It's a mental shortcut, and it's laziness really. So instead of thinking about humans trying to escape persecution and or find a better life for themselves, we think about migrants or immigrants. Whenever I hear that word uttered now in conversation, I want to close my ears, because I know it's almost always going to be said as an introduction to a demonisation of people or some other rant. Same with the word benefits. And then you get someone like our former Home Secretary who will qualify the words with other words like swarms, and then try to deny that it wasn't said in an insightful or inflammatory way. Where else though would you find human beings referred to in that way? We think immediately of swarms of flies or mosquitoes or wasps. Yes, she knew exactly what she was saying. Similarly, we had an Israeli government minister recently referred to Palestinians as animals. Now, technically that's correct. All human beings are animals. The animal species, human, mammal. But he meant it in the way we often use bestial terms, pig, cow, swine, sheep, to refer to subhuman qualities. In short, to dehumanise and thereby desensitise. We use all of these words, and I'm going to use a few now, so close your ears for a few seconds if you don't want to hear them. Puff, dyke, wop, hook nose, coon, nigger, dago, spick, tide, proddy, tory, psycho, loony. We use them to categorise, sum up and usually demonise people, to stereotype people. And they all tend to distract us from what's underneath all the connotations attached to those words. Take the words away and go back to basics. What have you got? Human being. Just simple human. And all the multifaceted and diverse things that means to be human. Perhaps it's only when we can come to finally talking solely in terms of human that we begin to find the word and hopefully the empathic impulse that extends from it. The one thing that we all have in common. Humanity. It's going to be hard to overcome, and we all do tend, even those who would spit blood in proclaiming our lack of judgment about others, we all do still tend to judge. I do, I admit. When I hear someone ranting on about immigrants or benefit scroungers or single mothers, my head shortcuts straight to Daily Mail reader. I keep trying though, and I do keep faith in the human ability to learn, to rehabilitate, to redeem. Somebody once said, we're never too old to lose our prejudices. Well, I hope there's some truth in that. In his famous poem, Song of Myself, Walt Whitman has this line, do I contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes. Wise words, I think. As long as we remain aware of those contradictions and the multitudes that we all contain.